assistant superintendents, good evening. Happy New Year, everyone. And Joan, thank you for helping us. Our superintendent, I'd like to call the meeting to order at this time. Start our regular meeting. And Priscilla, can you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance and the salute to the state flag? Thank you, Priscilla. Yeah. Let's go down to item, okay. I'm getting ahead of myself. So. Roll call, Joan. Here.
Chris Martinson. Michael Shaw.
Here.
Priscilla Manuelito.
Present.
Kevin Mitchell.
Here.
Thank you, Joan. We do have a quorum, so we can conduct business. We'll go to item number 2, approval of the agenda.
Mr. President, I would like to make the motion to postpone until February 18th item number 5, the study circle, public comment and reports.
Okay, that also includes the motion to approve the agenda, right?
With that change.
Yeah, okay. Is there a second? Second. Motion's been made by Michael Schaub to approve the agenda, but postponing those items under item 5, study circle. Second by Priscilla Manlito. Roll call, Joan.
Mr. Mitchell.
Yes.
Miss Manuelito.
Yes.
Mr. Shaw.
Yes.
Mr. Long.
Yes. Thank you, board members. We've approved our agenda. Let's go down to item A under approval of agenda. Mike?
President Long, members of the board, we're excited this evening to recognize a company in our community. I consider them a partner, although we don't have a formal agreement. But this company, Marathon Petroleum, has been extremely generous to our school district, has provided us funding, and has really supported our students in our school district to pursue technology and construction and other areas as a kind of as a pathway or potentially a career choice. And we hope that we can repay Marathon Petroleum with employees from our area that are even more skilled as they come out of high school through our career pathway program. So at this time, with that, I want to turn the time over to Carrie Lovato and others so that we can formally talk a little bit more about this contribution that Marathon Petroleum has given us and our students, and then at the end we'd like to have the board come down and shake hands and have a photo opportunity to show the community the great work that's being done for our students on behalf of this excellent company.
Good evening, board members. Thank you, Mr. Hyatt. So we have the pleasure today of having Angela Olive from Marathon Petroleum Company with us. So earlier this summer, we received a monetary gift from Marathon Petroleum in the amount of $75,000 in support of building our manufacturing and architecture clusters within our schools. So specifically, they donated $50,000 to our construction carpentry pathway development, and then $25,000 to our welding production pathway. And we had multiple schools benefit from the $75,000. So we have Gallup High that received funding for construction carpentry and welding, Crown Point High School for production welding, Navajo Pine for production welding, Rama for production welding, Sagai for construction carpentry, and Through High for construction carpentry. So totaling $75,000 altogether, which was really an honor and a gift for these programs. So I have Gallup High and Through High here with me today, and their principals, and I think we even have a student, Wilmer. Would you like to come up?
Yeah, let's have them come up.
So I'm going to have the principals and the teachers speak on behalf of their programs so they can tell us how they've benefited student learning and the development of their pathways within their two schools. So I have Dominic Romero and Lawrence Senna Dominic from Gallup High and Lawrence from Fruit. If you guys want to come up and introduce yourself.
One, thank you guys for Marathon. I appreciate it. With us building these pathways, not only is it building a higher graduation rate for our school and building that engagement and that want to teach students, it's also building those jobs that our community desperately needs and a craft that is definitely in our community something we need. So with us today, some of the backbone of our program is Mr. Jeff Wheeler and John Wells.
You know, I've been in the district a long time, and I have never received anything like this. This is a game changer for us and the whole district. Need to throw a big thanks out to Leland Gold that got this whole thing rolling. We hope that this is a long-term, partnership that we can get some students out there to help you guys with you guys are the largest oil refinery in the United States and one of the largest refineries in the world. So very big and very glad to get a partnership with you. I took the money I had and enhanced my TIG welding program, and that's going to help us, help my kids, and I thank you very, very much.
John Wells, I'm the carpentry construction teacher at Gallup High School. Funding really helped us with going in the pathway for us since we had a lot of freeway on our money and stuff like that, so we were able to fund our different programs. I now have 3 programs instead of just one, and so from 3 different directions, and we've got a lot of stuff, a lot of storage, and a lot of possibilities for our students, and we really appreciate your help. It's made a huge difference, and will continue to make a huge difference for years to come.
Good evening, everybody. Lawrence Senna from Thoreau High School, and we'd also like to thank you. The changes that we've made over the last couple of years has been outstanding. We've been using federal dollars to help, build our auto program. We've had a construction program there, but, little by little, we've been putting piece by piece in there. And, when they told us, hey, we got a chance to get some money, I talked to my teacher, and he was really ecstatic. He wanted to be here tonight, but he's a basketball coach for us, so he was dealing with that. But the excitement that he had, knowing that he could bring some equipment in to do some different projects and things that we had underway, has really been a game changer for us in our school. And just like Dominic said earlier, our students are really interested in these kinds of hands-on activities, and to be able to bring in more modern machinery and really do some amazing things. And so some of the things we've already done, if you walk into our building and you go into our gym, you can see the changes that we made in the entrance into our gym and the woodwork. It's all been done by our students in the program. And so it's we're really trying to bring that back to the school, and then hopefully we'll bring it back out to the community and help you guys as well. With us tonight we have Wilmer Shirley. He's a senior student and working in that construction class, and he took it upon himself to do some pretty good work himself, and so he'll go ahead and present you with the plaque as well. And I'd like him to maybe say a little bit about the machines that he used to make this that were part of the money that you guys brought into our school.
Well, hello. I use a toner, drill press,
I'll give you a hint. I think he used a printer.
Oh, yeah, but anyways, the boss laser I use for this plant. It's really nice. It really helps me understand more about your machinery and how to operate and use the computer. Also help for the students as well. Like,
Mr. Long, President Long, I also want to just quickly mention we appreciate Mr. Taylor. I think it was last Christmas break or winter break that Marathon somehow got in contact with him. He's a teacher standing here. He actually put in many hours during not this last break, but the break before, going the extra mile to make sure the paperwork was done so we could receive this money. And so we really appreciate Mr. Taylor for taking that time on his break. Wasn't it your break last year? Right. And a lot of hours, a lot of conversations, and I believe they were with Mr. Leland and some other employees of the Marathon Petroleum, but he was able to put it together, and so we really appreciate his generosity in spending his time. And not all the money went to Gallup High. We spread that out amongst the different schools so that everybody could benefit. So we really appreciate his work last Christmas, last winter break.
Thank you, Mike. Board members, any comments?
Mine can. Okay, I'm sorry. I just wanted to say thank you for the principals coming also to Marathon for providing this funding for our youth. It's so needed, and one of the things that we're working on is career pathways. And I know everybody iterated everything that we needed to say, but I just wanted to say a little bit about the plaque you got. Not only that you made by our youth, but that's a special symbol in our indigenous culture, the arrowhead. It's used as a protection. A lot of our warriors wear it, and they're they use it to protect them from any harm to come to them. So that's very prestigious that you did get an arrowhead tonight, because that is very meaningful in our culture. So I just wanted to mention that, and I hope that we see you next year. But thank you very much, and be safe.
Yes, thank you. With more money next year, I hope. That was good. Board members, let's go to item number 3, approval of the meeting minutes of the December 16, 2019 regular meeting.
I would like to make a motion that we approve the minutes of December 16th, 2019.
Okay, motion's been made by Michael Schaaf to approve the meeting minutes of December 16, 2019. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, second by Kevin Mitchell. Roll call. Joan?
Mr. Mitchell,
Yes.
Ms. Manuelito,
Yes.
Mr. Shaw,
Yes.
Mr. Long.
Yes. Thank you, board members. We approved the meeting minutes. Let's go down to item number 4, approval of consent agenda items.
Cheryl, go ahead, motion for approval.
Gushin, there's a motion been made by Priscilla Manlito to approve the consent agenda items. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Michael Shaw. Roll call, Joan?
Mr. Mitchell,
Yes.
Ms. Manuelito,
Yes.
Mr. Shaw,
Yes.
Mr. Long.
Yes. Thank you, board members. Let's go down to item 6, new business. Approval of transportation boundary agreement between Grants Cibola County Schools and Gallup McKinley County Schools for school year 2020 and 2021. Mike?
President Long, members of the board, as you know, we have been working for probably years, but this has come to a head recently of the need to create a new boundary agreement with the Grant Cibola County School District so that we have a recognized agreement so that we can go into their county near the Rama area, Pine Hill, and the Ice Cave area, so we can pick up students, because it is more realistic and appropriate for those students to come into our school district due to the distance down to Grants, and vice versa on the other side of the mountain in Pruitt, where they come in and they also pick up some students there to take them to Through, because it's more convenient for their families who work in Peru. So this agreement essentially creates, between the two districts, an understanding of where those bus stops are. So there's actually maps included in the agreement. We had to update it a little bit today. I believe you potentially got a new copy, just to show where the bus spots were exactly. Grants asked that we do that to make sure it was very clear that the agreement was for those bus stops, especially in the Pine Hill area. And so we wanted to make sure it was delineated exactly where we were going and where they were allowed to go within our school district to pick up students. Several meetings took place in order to get this agreement to where it is right now, obviously between our own legal team and us and theirs, Grants and their legal team. But also we met with PED alongside of the chapter representative from the Rama Navajo chapter, and we're able to, I think everybody, except for a few, want and appreciate the opportunity for students to be able to go where they choose. And students deserve the right to receive a free public education, and so this will solidify that. So at this time, once it's approved, I hope, from you, it will go to the state of New Mexico, and we will just await their approval and whether they want us to make some changes or not. So again, I did talk with Public Education Department in that meeting, and they seemed excited to move forward, and so we will, as soon as this is done tonight, we will move forward to get that approved by them, and hopefully that moves quickly. So any questions that you have for me?
Questions? Board members?
Mr. Hyatt, since this is in my area, I just wanted to really get clarification on the boundary agreement for the Pruitt area. I think I know the boundary area for Rama, but how about for Pruitt?
The bus stop will be located where it's currently picking up students.
Okay.
That's the only location that they would be able to pick up students. On the original agreement, we had some distances of where we could go within the two different school district areas, but we felt it was more appropriate to specify the exact spots where we would be picking up students, so we don't run into buses going further than they should be going to pick up students that really aren't appropriate to go to different school districts.
And that's the reason why I'm asking, because I know at one of the chapter meetings, they wanted us to go, come in more, so, yeah.
Right, I
Okay.
know that at one point we were, the buses were stopping short of the current location, but I believe now they go all the way to where the chapter and the community wants the buses, and is a safe place where the buses can go. It's been a few years since we had that conversation with the Pruitt chapter, but that's my recollection. But like I said, we will always be able to have the freedom to make sure that we can do it in a safe manner, and so that is understood by Grants and the Gallup McKinley School District.
Any other questions?
And then we revisit this again in 2022?
Yes, Mrs. Manuelito, this is a 2-year agreement, although according to state regulations, it continues until one of the parties wants to move away from or not agree to it. So even though we put a time frame on it, that's what I believe Grants wanted to do. And so we were okay with that. And if we have to revisit every 2 years as a formality, that's fine. But again, even if we didn't touch it in 2 years, it would still be in place according to state regulations.
Thank you, sir.
Any other questions? What is the wish of the board?
I would like to make a motion for approval of transportation boundary agreement between Grant, Cibola County Schools and Gallup McKinley County Schools for the school year of 2020-2021.
I will second Mr. Shaw's motion, sir.
Gashim, thank you. Michael Shaw made a motion to approve the transportation boundary agreement between Grant Cibola County Schools and Gallup McKinley County School for school year 2020-2021. Second by Priscilla Manlito. Roll call, Joe.
Mr. Mitchell,
Yes.
Ms. Manuelito,
Yes.
Mr. Shaw,
Yes.
Mr. Long.
Yes. Thank you, board members. Let's go down to new business B, approval of impact aid resolution. Mike?
President Long, members of the board, I know that you are fully aware of our need and to fight for impact aid and a resolution to the problems that have been happening in New Mexico for decades. It's clearly a system that Mexico has had for funding education. It's clearly embedded with institutional racism. It's become more and more clear to me the more I study and the more we fight for this equity that our students deserve with funding in New Mexico, that this is truly an extreme bias situation where they're taking from the poor, to be exact, approximately $22 million from the most impoverished county in the state, and distributing that wealth to the more wealthy parts of the state without any money in return to keep us on par, so our students can be on par with other students across the state of New Mexico with respect to funding, especially in the area of capital funding for school buildings. They help us build beautiful buildings, but they're not sufficient and appropriate and adequate for an education. And so this resolution is simply for us, and I believe Zuni is also partnering on this agreement, to make sure that the board's voice is heard to the legislature, to make sure that they understand that we are serious. I think they know that by now after last session. But we deserve, and our students deserve, a resolution to this so that there is more equity in the state. It's gone on for decades where we have had legislators call the funding formula in New Mexico an equalized funding formula. And with the help of our business official, Ms. Hanks, and others, we believe, to have a very strong case with the federal government that it is not an equalized formula, and the state of New Mexico has been caught in their creative math to fit numbers to get the money from us, and I think we have exposed them for this false presentation to the federal government in form of the disparity analysis. So with that, if you have any questions for me, please let me know, and this is a favorite topic of mine, so I'll talk about this one all night.
Questions, board members?
The first question I have, Mr. Hyatt, you said Zuni and us. I know that there was talk with CCSD and I believe Cuba that wanted to do a resolution. Do you know if they had any discussion on this, especially CCSD?
President Long, Mrs. Manuelito, we didn't formally, we do work together very closely in the last year to fight for this funding, but as far as the resolutions, I think Zuni had started to do a resolution, and because we have one attorney that we share, I got wind of it, and so we decided to create it together to make sure it would encompass all the things we needed to encompass with respect to our position. I did not ask Central Consolidated, nor have I asked Cuba if they're doing a resolution. I believe they have a different attorney. They may have, and I can find out by a simple phone call.
Thank you for that. You know, it just appalls me that we continue to. My biggest issue on this is not only the fact that our children's money is being taken away every year, which is sad enough, but I think that these federal funds that were provided to our children at the U.S. Congress provided these funds, that's not even looked at by body of representative and senators that say that they would uphold different laws in our nation, and yet, you know, one of the the biggest capacity of governance of the Congress, they're not even abiding by that. And it, you know, these funds were given to our children to assist them, but it's stripped right away and given to other school districts. And that, no one is really looking at for our children. They're looking at percentages, they're looking at formulas, but they are not looking at how this is affecting our children. And they've done this for years. And I'm so glad that we do got some. I believe, you can correct me if I'm wrong, sir, that we still got a couple of our legislators that are willing to fight for the 100% and not playing politics to where they're compromising and telling us maybe we'll do 50% and still cheating our kids off. But I don't know if we still, I would like that for the record, if we still do have our legislators that are fighting 100% for our children.
President Long, Ms. Manuelito, with respect to your last question, our local legislators, I believe so, and you know, the session has started, and I know there's some bills that have dropped, and we have had a lot of conversations, not only with the governor, but through our lobbyists and with our legislators, our different legislators, not only in our area but other areas, trying to find some ways in which we can establish a bill that can get us money back. You're right, we should be getting 100% back, so that's the intent of those funds in the first place. But what worries me is that legislators may try to restrict funds if we do get money back. And I think that's something that we need to be very cautious of in the language of our legislators across the state and locally, to make sure that it's understood that other people that get dollars from other places, whether it's through a grant or donations or whatever it might be, they have the free agency to spend that money as they choose. The state has never stepped in and said, oh, we want you to spend it this way or that way. And so I think it's very important for us to take a stand that we have the flexibility to meet our students' needs as we see fit and with this funding that we receive, because as you know, often it comes with with restrictions attached, because they want to micromanage what we do, while they let property wealthy districts and other wealthy districts be able to spend it how they please. Another piece of the institutional bias that we face.
With that said, Superintendent, I think we need to, I really feel that we need to stand strong and stay with 100% that we've been asking for, and that meaning 100% given totally to our district for us to use in the best way that we know how that it's going to help our kids. With our legislators in the state of New Mexico wanting to give a percentage back, but also wanting to still control that money that doesn't belong to them is what bothers me. That money needs to be given to our children. It belongs to them and to the school district, and for us as a school district to provide the money back to the students to make sure that they're educated in a proper manner with the money that is actually theirs.
Kushi, thank you. Any other comments? I think this session now, our biggest fight for Impact 8 is going to be in the Senate again. And it's something that we really need to, one of the things that we really need to focus on is to get our state out of the equalization state. Ourselves, Kansas, and Alaska were the only 3 states that use equalization formula. And this is an issue that dates way back, and I think there's other strategies we have, and we're going to continue to fight for these funding. I know the state wants to give us state monies to try to make up for the monies that they take from us. But I think if they do that, we need to make sure that there's no restrictions placed on those funds. And that's what we're going to be fighting for. But thank you for your comments. So what is the pleasure of the board?
Mr. Long, I just have another one. Are we taking some students up to Santa Fe? Is there any travel for them to advocate, or just even experience? I shouldn't even say, because I think that would be an important process for them to also learn about. We did see some last year, but I don't know if there's any this year traveling up to.
President Long, Mrs. Mangalito, I can get you a list of students that are traveling. I know we do for sure have students coming from Twin Lakes Elementary, I believe. They're going to be recognized on the floor due to their high growth rate this past year with respect to their state assessment. We don't necessarily dictate if schools can go, but they're welcome to go. So every year it seems like we typically have a bus or 2 or 3 or 4 or more traveling to Santa Fe for at least part of the session for that experience. But we can definitely send out an email just in case people haven't thought of that, as it's come upon us pretty quickly, to give them that idea that they're welcome to take students up to Santa Fe to with them experience our democracy at work.
Have we also, I'm sorry, Mr. Long, have we also heard anything from our report back from the federal government?
President Long, Mrs. Mangalito, we have been in constant communication with them. Initially, they said that they would have an answer before the end of the year, in about late November or so, 1st of December. They notified us that it would be delayed. It was today that we found out that it would actually, they're projecting that they'll be done by February, end of February.
And one more question. I just for curiosity's sake, how much do you think in the last, I don't know, let's say 10 years, have we lost money to the state of New Mexico from them stealing from our children?
We typically have, we'll guesstimate about 20 million a year. So if you calculate over 10 years, we're talking about $200 million just from our district. That doesn't include Central Consolidated and Zuni and all the other 27 districts that have Impact 8 credits taken.
So one of the things that I keep hearing, and I just want, maybe just for my clarification to make sure, because I always see that visual pie graph. I heard one of the Navajo Nation staff say that the what did it say on there, $28 million that was on that pie graph?
22 for us.
22 million?
approximately.
That was what we get back. And I was telling them, no, that's before the 25%, because they were saying, well, you get close to, your impact aid gets almost $100 million. Your 25% is at 22 million. And I'm like, no, I think you're giving us too much money. And I think it's 22%, and then they cut it in 75%, so we get about 6 to 7 million.
I'll use some rough numbers, and I
Yeah.
know Giovanna does not want me to do this, but just for the sake of the
I know,
conversation.
I'm doing it, she's over there looking at me.
It's probably closer to around, let's say 28 million that we receive from the federal government. We're able to keep 25% of that, which is about approximately 7 million. And then the state shorts us on our state funding by about $21 million, meaning that although we keep our impact aid, they give us 21 million less of operational dollars. So no, what they're trying to describe is inaccurate. Typically we see either a few legislators in the state or else state employees who try to confuse people, because it is complicated, and I think maybe it was designed to be complicated so that people didn't understand what was happening. And so they throw that around like how much money we keep. Well, we get 28, we keep 7. The rest of it we lose. So that's the money that we're fighting for, that we applied for, and that our students deserve.
You got, yeah. The other thing is, that impact aid is, another name for that is PILT, payment in lieu of taxes. Since Native Americans don't pay property taxes, it's the federal government that pays for us. That's what this money is. And the other thing that I know Mike and his assistant superintendents are fighting for is, since we get impact aid towards the end of the school year, they try to spend all the monies, and I think the thing that happens is any impact aid money that remains, it's swept by the state and it's used by the governor's office, right, Mike?
Yeah, essentially they under-project revenues for impact aid. That way there's leftover dollars at the end of the year in operational dollars, and those operational dollars get reverted back to the general fund. So essentially this last year was $33 million that was supposed to go to students in New Mexico for their education. The legislators, I believe, thought was going to go to students, actually got reverted in 2019. So $33 million went back to the state general fund and gets distributed however they want to distribute it. And it's a little bit of a kind of a loophole, or maybe a strategy. I'm sure they pay attention to that very carefully, because they want to spend our money on other things, and it should be on students.
Yeah, I think that's, thank you, Mike. I think that's the other issue that we're fighting, to make sure that any residual of the impact aid monies are not swept and reverted back to the state. So I'm glad that Mike and his assistant superintendents are working on it, especially Giovanna. Thank you for your help on this. I really appreciate it. So what's the pleasure of the board on new business B?
Mr. Long, I'll go ahead and motion to approve the impact aid resolution.
Okay, a motion's been made by Priscilla Manlito to approve the impact aid resolution. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Michael Shaw. Roll call, Joan?
Yes.
Mr. Mitchell? Ms.
Yes.
Manuelito?
Yes.
Mr. Shaw?
Yes.
Mr. Long?
Yes. Thank you, board members. Yeah. Let's go down to new business. C, approval of resolution, Gallup, McKinley County School Board of Education to advocate against any cash balance caps. Mike?
President Long, members of the board, recently we have started hearing the idea of cash balance caps. In my experience, the way I view it at the state level is we have state employees that try to portray, especially due to our winning of the Yazzie Martinez lawsuit, that we have an abundance of funds in the district that is not being spent. That's what they try to portray. I think it's a tactic, strategy to try to lead legislators to think that school districts have enough money. The fact is, and unfortunately, we need to do a better job of educating legislators locally and around the state, and also, I believe the state employees don't need to be educated. I think they know exactly what they're doing when they try to manipulate the situation. Let them recognize that when a district, especially a district like ours, who's heavily federally funded, and in conjunction with other things, the way the funding happens in the state with respect to the raises they gave last year and different things like that. But going back again to the heavily federally funded districts, you have to have enough money that covers your liabilities until you get reimbursed. And so if I have a cash balance of say $10 million, I can't just go spend that because it's probably leveraged against federal dollars that haven't been reimbursed through the state of New Mexico back to us. So what's been happening lately in New Mexico is the public education department has had a very slow processing time to give us reimbursements, and so we have to fund these things up front and then wait for reimbursement. But I have to cover that liability. And so our cash balance can fluctuate. And the state of New Mexico tries to make that look like somehow that us and other districts are trying to hoard cash, when in fact it's designated for a specific purpose. We do a very good job of being efficient. We are somewhat conservative in the way that we do funding for our district to make sure that we don't have any reoccurrence of cash shortages like we had in 2007 and 8, and trying to pay salaries and making sure that we're paying our payroll. So we have been fiscally conservative to make sure we don't get in that situation again, and also making sure that we're covering the funds that we need to, those liabilities that we need to. And so then what happens, because we're doing things what we see as the right way, and so does the public education department sees it the same way as we do. We're doing it the right way. Yet we get state entities like PSFA and PSCOC, legislators, state employees from LFC specifically, that try to, whether they know or whether they do know, try to portray that we have extra cash. And so it's unfortunate that legislators in the PSCOC and also PSFA don't have the financial sense of what educational funding, how it operates sometimes. Many do, but some don't. And so it's going to take more education on our part to make sure that they understand, which they should already know, but how educational funding works in the state of New Mexico. And so it's become a fight for us as of late, as we have tried to get funding for school buildings and get waivers from the state of New Mexico so they can give us the funding that our students deserve for capital projects. But recently, analyst actually, who's the deputy director of the LFC, did a presentation and talked about cash balances in one of the committee meetings recently. And so now that he said that publicly, other superintendents have latched onto those comments. We've had a conversation as superintendents on the phone this past week about the problems with cash balance caps. And so it's understood by all superintendents that this is not a good thing because the state used to do this in the past. The one thing that I just want to make sure is clear on the why I wanted this to be documented is because this could become a legal argument for us, potentially in a fight against the state, because if we're more federally funded and we have to have a higher cash balance to cover our liabilities because of that federal funding, if they put the cap in a way that doesn't allow us or disincentivizes us in some ways to acquire more funding, then our students are being put at a disadvantage compared to other districts who don't receive as much federal funding, who don't need to have as big of a cash balance to cover those liabilities. And so, in my opinion, and I've sought legal opinion, that it would actually be discriminatory in nature, not only to low-income areas such as ours, but also Native American populations. A lot of our funding that comes to us comes because of our Native American population. So I wanted to make sure that was clear, is that the purpose of this is to share our voice to the state and to others, but also let them know that if this is done, and if it's done in a way that discriminates against our district and our students, then we will potentially to pursue legal action.
Any questions?
I just want to say that, that I think this resolution is good, and I really think that it scares me that our legislators and others don't understand the cash balance that we have and the reasons why we have it. And then when they get cornered on something they don't know, then of course they throw us under the bus, which is not good, not knowing that we're doing everything properly in order to keep our school district running without running into, being deficient in funds, money.
And again, I want to be clear, it's not everybody, but a lot of people don't understand educational funding. It is complex. And the legislators, they're not accountants for the most part, and it takes time to learn some of these things. But when we explain it clearly, when PED understands it and understands why the cash balance caps are not a good thing, and we've also had conversations with the DFA in Santa Fe also to try to make sure that they understand what's happening in New Mexico and how cash balance could potentially be a significant harm, especially to low-income, highly federally funded school districts.
Yeah.
Mr. Wong?
Yes.
I just wanted to say a couple, again, I agree with Mr. Mitchell. I think this is a process, and I'm thankful that you guys have gotten this resolution together and presented to the board for our approval. I think it speaks a lot that we're looking ahead, and we're looking ahead for our children's sake. And I think a lot of people are forgetting about the children, and I think we need to continue to reiterate that this is like we're trying to do what we can to protect our children. One thing that I would really like to ask, I don't know when the contract ends or when we're doing this again, but I really, really would like to strongly encourage our lobbyists to help us with what we have been used to in the past, to where we should have met with our legislators like we've done in the past. We haven't done it now for I think 3 years now, maybe almost, this is probably our 3rd year. We used to have a work session with legislative priorities, and this kind of discussion should be one of the agenda items, that we discuss these kind of issues to help. I know sometimes they're not all here, we don't expect them to all show up, but I think the ones that are really willing to know more about it will come. And if we've even done them in 2 different dates. But I think I would really encourage that next year for our lobbyists to sit down and pull our local legislators together, so we can continue to have these discussions and make them aware of some of our issues that we have here. I know that there's a Navajo Nation state task force that they do that with Indian or Native Navajo issues, but I think we should continue that process in the future for ourselves. But I'm like I said, but I'm thankful that we are taking this route, another resolution, and I would also continue to fight, and if we have to go through another lawsuit again, because we're just doing what's best for our children. And sometimes it's sad to say, sometimes that's the only way people start to really listen, is when you've got a lawsuit on them. And I think, we did that with Yazi Martinez. Boy, everybody was listening with that now. Everybody's doing what they can to listen, trying to fix that. And I think that, it's hard to say. I know that's the last thing we want to do, but if it's for the benefit of our children, we got to do what's best for them.
Agushi, thank you, Priscilla. Kevin, so with that, those comments and all that, what is the pleasure of the board?
I would like to make a motion approval of the resolution, Gallup McKinley County School Board of Education to advocate against any cash balance cap.
The motion's been made by Michael Shaw to approve resolution Gallup McKinley County School Board of Education to advocate against any cash balance caps. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Kevin Mitchell. Roll call, Joan?
Mr. Mitchell,
Yes.
Ms. Manuelito?
Yes.
Mr. Shaw,
Yes.
Mr. Long?
Yes. Thank you, board members, and I believe that with that, we've concluded our business for this evening. I want to entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Okay. Michael Schaaf moved to adjourn. Is there a second?
So moved. Second. Sorry.
Gushing, Priscilla, Manlito, second. Roll call, Joan?
Mr. Mitchell,
Yes.
Ms. Manuelito?
Yes.
Mr. Shaw,
Yes.
Mr. Long?
Yes.
6:50.
Okay, thank you. We adjourn at 6:50. Thank you, board members. Safe trip home. Yeah.